Today, we're visiting the Fuji Blimp at Brown Field. As you can see and hear in the background, we're getting ready to take off. It's a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. The wind is calm, perfect for flying in a lighter than airship. I'm going to wrangle up one of the officers of the Fuji Blimp and we'll get today's show started. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Dominique Manière, and I'm a pilot of this blimp. This blimp is used by Fuji for advertising purposes, and we also fly for television and make some footballs or marathons or other sports events.
Yeah. A couple of obvious questions. How much does this blimp weigh without helium?
Well, yeah, without the weight is depending on what you mean. It can have a positive or negative weight with the helium, but
with helium it's negative.
It could be negative or positive.
Okay. As it comes from the factory, before you put the helium in it,
it's about around 5 metric tons.
5 metric tons. And with the helium, it has a negative weight because it's lighter than air. What is its lifting capability with the helium?
It's about the overall maximum total mass is 7,100 kilograms. So that's 7.1 metric tons.
7 tons. The size of the balloon is deceiving. It's larger than it looks when it's in the air. Do you know the dimensions, the length?
Yeah, it's about 60 meters long.
60 meters long. 1 meter is approximately 3 feet?
About 3 feet, yes. A little more.
And what does it carry? Is it 9 passengers it carries?
Depending on the interior arrangement, it can carry up to 8 passengers. Usually we don't have as many seats on board though.
Okay, but it has the capacity. Is that plus the 2 crew members then?
That's right.
And then you actually have a restroom in the blimp.
We have.
And it's used mostly for advertising, you say?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, the speed of the blimp I notice very slow. What is the cruising speed?
Cruising speed's about 30-35 knots.
30 to 35 knots. And is there an altitude range on this?
Well, depending on the quantity of helium, temperature, atmospherical pressure, theoretically the maximum height is about 10,000 feet. But in that case we would have no lift because we would have no helium to go. So usually we fly around 1,500 feet, and day like today with the helium we have, I guess our ceiling would be around 3,000 or less.
Since it's powered by basically aircraft engines, if an aircraft engine would top out at about 10,000 feet, then the engines on the blimp would top out at about 10,000.
These are not aircraft engines, these are Porsche engines, cars.
Oh, Porsche engines. Right. Oh, they're not aircraft engines.
No, they're not.
Okay. So you have 2 Porsche engines.
Porsche engines, yes, 230 horsepower, 250 horsepower continuous for takeoff though.
Is each one?
That's right.
So you got 500 horsepower.
For takeoff, yes.
And I believe it's 5 bladed propellers you use?
That's right.
Okay. And that's for maximum power as opposed to speed.
Yes, as the airship isn't that fast, I guess that's the reason.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to tell our audience this morning before we get ready for liftoff? Do you call it launch or liftoff? What do you call it?
Whatever you like.
We did a show on hot air balloons, and they say launch.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if a blimp would use the same terminology.
Usually it's more liftoff because usually we will take off heavy, so the engine will give the thrust to take off. Or if it's a short flight and the airship has been standing in the sun, so the helium is heated, and then it looks more like a launch. The airship would rise by himself.
Okay. Very good. We're going to cut the camera and get ready for launch of the Fuji Blimp. We are now free from the mooring mast. We're being secured by 2 ropes held by 6 crew members. The support truck and mooring mast is moving out, and we're about ready for liftoff. Pilot is moving around into the wind. At the present time, we're being moved by the ground crew. We have a rope on the right and a rope on the left. 6 ground crew, 3 on each rope, and they're actually pulling us to the right, maneuvering us manually into position for takeoff. Again, we want to express our appreciation to the Fuji Corporation for allowing us to visit with them today and to explain to you and show you the functions of the Fuji Blimp. This is a 2nd or 3rd generation blimp, far removed from the dirigibles of the 1920s and 30s. And we're lifting off. Full power, steep takeoff. It's like a carrier takeoff. Fast, steep, full power takeoff until we get several hundred feet up, and then they throttle back and it's a normal climb out. Henry Gifford, a French engineer, was the first person to successfully combine an engine with a balloon that could be steered. His aircraft used a 3-horsepower steam engine linked to a wooden propeller to drive the craft at 5 miles per hour. On September 24, 1852, he flew 17 miles over the suburbs of Paris. By using a boat rudder, he could turn the nose of the ship, but the engine lacked the power to turn the balloon around to return to the starting point. The first truly successful airship was La France, built by Charles Renard in 1884. You can see the shadow of the blimp down on the ground. And if the camera operator will come up and to the right a little, you can see Brownfield Airport. We're cruising at about 30 knots. At this moment, we're going in a southwestern direction, which means we're heading toward San Isidro. I'm going to interview the pilots in just a moment, and they can explain the technical aspects of flying the Fuji Blimp. It's a completely different animal from an airplane. Would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Gary Fabian.
What is the speed that we're cruising at?
Right now we're doing 28 knots.
28 knots. And what is our altitude?
1,000 feet above sea level.
Is 28 knots your usual cruising speed?
That's kind of a slow cruising speed, just kind of a slow cruise.
Okay. Does a dead calm day like today make any difference in your speed or the maneuvering of the blimp?
Well, it makes a difference in the ground speed. With the dead calm air, we can, what we're reading on our airspeed indicator is actually what we're doing across the ground. Of course, in a high wind, if we got a headwind, we'll be going slower across the ground, so it takes us longer to get somewhere.
I'd like for the camera to swing around and show our audience the control panel and the ropes hanging out in front. And while the camera operator does that, could you explain for our audience what those instruments are, please?
All right. Basically, over here we have our flight instruments, keeping up with our airspeed, pressure, heading, altitude, our weather radar, all the radio equipment, navigation equipment, engine instruments are over here on this side. And then up on the top we have all of our electric circuits, circuit breakers, warning panel.
Now, flying a blimp is completely different from an airplane. You have two engines and two propellers, like a twin-engine airplane, but there the similarity ends. What is the main thing that a pilot needs to remember or keep in control in flying a blimp?
The main thing, I guess, is just be patient. Everything happens really slowly, and you've got to just really be patient with it.
So you're usually flying around 28 to 30 knots, and all of the movements are very slow?
Correct. Of course, the wind has a tendency to push us around just a little bit more than it would in an airplane.
Thank you for the technical explanations. Could you tell our audience now about the Fuji Corporation and their operation of this blimp for the enjoyment of the public?
Okay. The Fuji Corporation is a worldwide corporation. The Fuji USA Corporation is based in New York, and we operate the airship for the Fuji USA Corporation.
And the obvious enjoyment for the public is to see the ship flying, to run out in the backyard and point and yell, "Look, look, look." You do also give rides. Is it for rewards, or how does that work?
Basically, it's for Fuji promotions. They each place around the country, each sales office will take up certain customers for rides.
Okay. I was going to say, how do I get a job with Fuji if that's a fringe benefit? You do travel all over the United States?
Correct. We spend the winter on the West Coast and summer on the East Coast.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
I understand that you're based in North Carolina, or you build the ships in North Carolina?
Correct. This ship was assembled in North Carolina.
Okay. But then is your home base New York, where the corporate headquarters is? Well, you don't have a home base, do you?
No, my home base is in Texas.
Okay. But the ship, if it's moving year-round, does it have a home base?
It doesn't really have a home base. We use Weeksville, North Carolina, where it was assembled at, as our maintenance base, and that's where the majority of the ground crew is from.
Okay, so that would technically be your home base because you go there for maintenance.
Correct.
But in actuality, you're constantly on the move.
Right.
Now, you're here in San Diego for how long?
We're here through the 19th.
How long have you been here?
For just about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I think.
Okay. And do you come every year?
Just about every year we've come down here to San Diego.
And is it in January every year?
Pretty much. Usually around
somebody is very smart to plan to come to San Diego in January. So our viewers next January, if they don't have a chance to see you this visit, they could watch the papers, or they could come and visit you next January when you come back to San Diego.
Correct.
If they come and park at Brown Field, is it okay if they bring a sack lunch and watch you take off and land? And
sure. We'd love to see them watch us operate out there. It's not a very close spectator area close to our launch site, but up at the terminal they should be able to see us.
They could park. There's a parking lot at the base of the control tower, and they could park there, and because it's so big and you're in a big flat open area, they could watch all of the aspects of your operations from the parking lot.
All right.
Okay. Very good. The envelope of this blimp is really just a big balloon, 1.5 inches thick. There's nothing inside of it. It's 1.5 inches thick balloon with the gondola and the engine attached below. We're flying at about 300 feet, and 28 to 30 knots above Chula Vista and San Isidro in the Fuji Blimp. A real experience. We're over Interstate 5, and this is the new freeway that goes to Imperial Beach. We're about a half a mile from the helicopter airport, Ream Field, at Imperial Beach. Directly ahead of us is the Pacific Ocean, and off about 9 o'clock to the left is the Coronados Islands. And about 10 o'clock to the left is Ream Field, the Navy helicopter base. Now we're directly over Imperial Beach, and the pier and the Pacific Ocean is at about 11 o'clock. The Fuji Blimp is traveling at 30 knots, and we're at about 500 feet altitude. You're looking at the left engine of the Fuji Blimp. It's a Porsche engine, not an aircraft engine. And if the camera will pan across the gondola, we'll show you the other engine. There are two engines powering the Fuji Blimp. They have 5 bladed propellers. We're on our way back in now. We've returned from Imperial Beach, crossed over San Isidro, and we're now directly in between Tijuana Airport and Brownfield Airport. We're heading due east. Brownfield is on our left at about 10 o'clock. You can see the old control tower, and you can see the new control tower. And the wind has picked up just a little. We're bobbing up and down like a rowboat in the ocean. Just a little bit of a roll. If you can see the new control tower, you'll see 2 hangars there right at the base of the control tower. And I can see a Very Easy and a couple of other airplanes there. Every Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, the Experimental Aircraft Association has a brunch, and it's open to the public. It's an excellent opportunity for you to come down and meet some pilots, see people who are building their own airplanes, and some experimental home-built airplanes. The engines have been rotated. They are now pointing upward as we begin our pattern for landing. They swivel on a ball and joint hinge, and they can fly level or pointed up or pointed down independently to give full maneuverability to the Fuji Blimp. If you look at the shadow of the Fuji Blimp now, it isn't moving. We're hovering. The truth is we're actually flying a little sideways, but we are hovering here. Can the camera come up and get that airplane? There's an airplane in the pattern. He's passing us because we're moving very slowly. Here's a Navy helicopter flying a pattern at Brownfield. That's from Ream Field. You can see the mooring ropes hanging out there in front of the nose of the blimp. Look what a steep angle we're at right now. We're headed straight down toward the ground. About a 30-35 degree angle. See the green and red and white Fuji shirts on the ground crew. Those bright colors help guide the blimp in. We've leveled off and we're hovering, and very, very slowly down to the landing spot. big circle on the ground below us, and that's where the one wheel that's underneath the blimp moves around as the wind changes. In early days, where dirigibles had permanent mooring, they actually had little railroad tracks there in a circle for the dirigible to move in. A blimp is a perfect weather vane. It moves whatever way the wind is blowing. So it would move in a complete 360-degree circle. And that's why we see a circle on the ground there below us. It's been raining the last few days, and the ground is soft, and so we have a perfect circle there made from the Fuji Blimp wheel. We're sinking down to the ground. You can probably see the ground crew now. We're low enough that they've grabbed the ropes. Again, we have 2 ropes, 1 on each side, 3 men on each side, and a ground chief in front, motioning with hand signals. We're about 3 feet off the ground now. And the wheel is touching. So we're back to earth.
Okay, folks, hope you enjoyed your flight.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is a Navy helicopter from Ream Field. The Fuji Blimp just flew over Ream Field at Imperial Beach. We have left the blimp, and I'm talking now with the pilot, John McHugh. Is it true that the blimp is really just a big 1.5 inch thick balloon?
Yes, well, it's not quite that thick. In fact, the fabric that it's made of, the envelope, is it's very strong, but it's thin, so it can be light in weight. But yeah, basically, it's a balloon filled with helium gas. There's no internal framework, so the shape of the envelope is maintained by the internal gas pressure.
I noticed as we were landing, you swiveled the engines. Could you tell our audience how you do that?
Yeah, the propeller ducts are on a common shaft, and they rotate upwards or downwards to apply thrust vertically. So it assists when there's slow speed maneuvering involved. As the airship slows down its speed in the air, the controls on the tail fins become less effective, of course. So for taking off, landing, and other slow speed operations like hover, it's necessary to rotate the propellers if needed.
It seemed like we were hovering, much like that helicopter. Do you ever really hover?
Yeah, we can. In fact, the airship can fly vertically up or downwards or even backwards if it needs to. It's a very maneuverable machine.
If I remember correctly, they did have blimps land on aircraft carriers. Can you do that?
We haven't tried that, but I suppose, yeah, it certainly has been done in the past. Those were U.S. Navy airships. Today, all airships flying worldwide are civilian, so we don't have aircraft carrier accessibility.
Okay. Would you describe this takeoff?
Yeah, the propellers are rotated upwards initially for the thrust off the ground. The pilot powers the airship into the air, rotates the propellers horizontal for forward airspeed. And now they're flying aerodynamically.
I don't know if the camera can show those ropes or not. You can see the flag in back and the mooring ropes hanging, and it is moving out smartly, taking off at a steep angle. How steep do you take off?
Maximum pitch up or down is 30 degrees.
And then, what is it, about 300 feet now?
It's about 300 feet, yeah.
And then you level off?
Yeah, we climb at least above 500 feet. We generally cruise at 1,000 feet AGL. We get the best visibility on the sign at that height, and we don't get any noise complaints, and I think everybody's quite satisfied at that altitude. Best combination of all factors.
Well, we certainly want to thank you, John McHugh, the pilot, and the corporation of Fujifilm for not only letting us visit with you today, but for having the Fuji Blimp for the public to enjoy.
Well, it's certainly our pleasure. On behalf of Fuji, we'd like to say thank you, and we're looking forward to seeing all our good friends in San Diego, hopefully around America's Cup time.
Very good. Thank you. I hope you've learned something today about lighter than airships. We especially thank the crew and the corporate structure of the Fuji Blimp for allowing us to visit with them here at Brown Field. As always, this is Captain Fred saying, happy landing!